Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. Great to have you in the conversation today. I want to play one more soundbite. We've had this kind of in the queue for a couple of weeks, but I thought it was just kind of intriguing. And Jeff, this is soundbite A12. And by the way, number to call if you want to join our conversation, talk about anything we've talked about today. Got to be something we've talked about on the program today. 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840 is the number to call. And this is an interview in a newspaper in the Willamette Valley in Oregon. Now, this guy's running for state office, but he's being interviewed along with other Republican candidates for this position by this editorial board at this newspaper. This is fairly customary. Newspapers will invite candidates to come in, and they will ask them questions, and then they will write up the results of the interview, and they will typically decide which candidate to endorse as a result of these interviews. Now, in this interview, one of the members of the newspaper was interviewing one of his fellow candidates, a competitor of his, that is somebody running against him for the same seat, and the candidate felt that the newspaper reporter was not treating his colleague, even though he was a competitor, was not treating him with respect by the way he was recording answers to their conversation. And he got right up in the grill of this reporter, and you can hear how this exchange ended.
You want to talk about disrespect? I see what you're writing down there. You just wrote down blah, 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 blah for everything that Jo Rae said. Jo Rae is a respectable woman.
Mark,
why are you not respecting her by writing blah, 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 blah on your notepad?
Mark, we're going to move on. I'm going to ask a question. And if you answer respectfully, we might be willing to let
you have to give respect in order to get respect. Right now, on that side of the table, you're not giving very much respect to the five of us in our time here.
You're wasting by doing this?
I just see what your colleague here is putting down on his notepad, and he put down blah, 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 when Jo Rae was giving a very detailed and descriptive answer.
Mark, here's my question. Climate change, do you believe that's a myth or a reality?
It's a myth.
It is?
Yes.
Okay.
Where are you on the Easter Bunny?
What's that?
I said, where are you on the Easter Bunny?
I'll stipulate.
Are these really the questions that I was called here to answer to quote a movie quote? Really?
Representative,
I called you out for putting blah, 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 blah on your notepad, and now you're asking me questions like this? Really? Really? Are we talking about this now?
let's move on.
Okay, how about you ask a very serious and respectful question instead of asking a little childish question?
Mark, I just asked you if climate change was a myth.
And I answered your question.
So can I now move on and get the response from someone else? And if you're not going to let me, I'm going to ask you to leave. Okay? That's 2 strikes.
Who do you think you are?
Okay, you may leave now. Go ahead. You're done here. This is neither a fair or a balanced meeting. This is a meeting for us to do.
I know it's a meeting being asked by disrespectful, thin-skinned liberals like yourself. There's the door. I got better things to do with my time.
You clearly do.
You know, I couldn't find the story in my stack. I've had it for a couple of weeks. All I know is that guy's first name is Mark, because I couldn't find the story in the stack, and I know his first name was Mark because somebody else in the newspaper addressed him by his first name. But I tell you what, I'd go vote for that guy in a minute. He believes that global warming is a myth. This whole climate catastrophe stuff is a total absolute myth. And he stuck up for the woman in the deal. He says, look, you are treating her with disrespect. That is what men do. Men step up to the plate and they protect and defend and shelter the women in their environment. That's what this guy did. So, Mark, if I lived in Oregon, I flat out guarantee you I would vote for you. Speaking of the environment just for a second, there are evangelical leaders in Florida now that are putting heat on Governor Rick, and they call themselves evangelicals, but they believe in all this global warming. It's just a hoax. The whole thing is a scam. There is nothing to it. And for evangelical leaders like Joel Hunter, who's the pastor of Northland Church in Longwood, and he's working with this organization called the Evangelical Environmental Network. And if I remember correctly, I'm going off the top of my head, but I think this Evangelical Environmental Network, EEN, I think they get George Soros money. I think they're funded by George Soros, just like the Evangelical Immigration Table is. So they are corrupting the term evangelical. You know, when people use the term evangelical, you typically think of somebody that's rooted solidly in the Scriptures. If you're rooted solidly in the Scriptures, you will oppose amnesty. You will oppose illegal immigration. And if you're rooted in the Scriptures, you will think that global warming stuff is absolute nonsense. So they're using the term evangelical, putting a lot of George Soros money in it to confuse people and to get people to think that the evangelical position is to buy into all of this global warming scam. And they're putting pressure on Rick Scott to create a plan to reduce carbon pollution. The problem is carbon dioxide is not a pollutant to begin with. It's plant food. Now, the other thing is you maybe heard these scare stories about how the Antarctic sea ice is melting. It's terrible. It's horrible. It's irreversible. Nothing can be done. Here's a piece from Climate Depot. Antarctic sea ice coverage continues breaking records, hits 3.5 million square miles in April, the largest on record. In other words, there's more Antarctic sea ice right now than they've ever measured in history. I mean, they've been measuring this since 1979 or something like that, 3.5 million square miles, and they beat the old record by 124,000 square miles, which is an area, this is just the increase, just the overage, the margin by which they beat the old record is bigger than Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Maryland combined, with room left over for another 184 islands the size of Manhattan. Australia's out there cutting spending on climate change by 90%. They've got conservative leaders. They realize the whole thing is swill. The whole thing is bogus. They're cutting their spending on global warming stuff by 90%. Another story here, I won't take time to work through it with you, but from the Washington Examiner about the fact that Big Green, you're talking about Greenpeace, the Sierra Club, World Wildlife Fund, all of these environmental activist groups, they have more money to spend on lobbying and advertising than Big Oil does. I mean, the myth out there is that they're the little guy and Big Oil has all these billions and billions and billions of dollars they can put into promoting their agenda, and the poor little tiny environmental groups are just like little midgets. And they have more money than Big Oil. Big Green has deeper pockets than Big Oil. I don't have time to work through that with you in detail, but that is the truth. Now, 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. Let's play clip number 1 and see if you've heard this before. We've got this VA scandal, 1.5 million medical orders just dumped in the garbage can somewhere. Probably 100 vets are dead through delayed treatment, and VA hospitals monkeying with the records to make it look like vets were seen sooner than they were. Now, we know, well, so how did President Obama find out about this scandal? Here is Jay Carney, clip 1 on how President Obama found out.
Follow up on that. When was the president first made aware of these problems, of these fraudulent lists that were being kept to hide the wait times? When was he first made aware of those problems? And when did other White House officials, top White House officials, become aware of these problems?
When you say these problems, the fact that there have been
For
bureaucracies,
some time, but the
if you mean the
fraudulent
specific allegations that I think were reported first by your network out of Phoenix, I believe we learned about them through the reports. I will double check if that's not the case, but that's when we learned about them, and that's when, as I understand it, Secretary Shinseki learned about them and immediately took the action that he has taken.
So again, this is like everything. President Obama learns about it on the news. I mean, this president is the most clueless president that the United States of America has ever had. He's always the last one to find out. He's the last one to be informed. He's the last one to discover that there's a scandal. He's the last one to find out that there are dead people. He's the last one to find out that the IRS is targeting conservative groups. He's the last one to find out about the NSA spying on reporters. And he finds out about all of this through the news. He's the last one to find out. Absolutely, utterly, totally clueless. And we know now, as a matter of fact, that President Obama was informed in 2008 by President Bush administration that there were real problems in the VA administration. So for them to say they just found out about it, not believable. All right, let's go to the phones. Let's go to Carla in Texas. Carla, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hi, how are you doing?
Good, Carla. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. Hey, you just mentioned something about the climate control, and while I believe it's a myth also, that you said something to the fact that people that are biblically grounded would know that it's a myth. I don't know if I quoted you right or not, so if I didn't, I'm sorry. But I was wanting you to explain what you mean by that.
Well, maybe that wasn't the most accurate way to put it. They would know that environmentalism is wrong and is a false philosophy. The business about anthropogenic global warming, that's a matter of science, and science makes it very clear. We've been pumping CO2 into the atmosphere. There's been no increase in global warming in 18 years. So we know from science that it is a myth that man is driving increase in global warming. But we know from the biblical account that environmentalism as a philosophy is wrong, because the Bible says that man is not a noxious weed. He is not a parasite. He has been appointed by God as a vice regent with dominion over all the earth. God created the earth, and he gave man authority over all the earth to develop it in order to provide for the needs that man has for food and shelter and clothing. So when man converts natural resources to human use, whether it's human habitation, human nutrition, heating for human beings, clothing for human beings, shelter for human beings, fuel for their automobiles and for their industries. When man does that, according to the Bible, that is a good thing. Now, according to environmentalism, when man even touches natural resources, he's blighting, he's corrupting, he's raping, he's pillaging. So if you have a biblical and evangelical worldview, then you don't fall for all of this pap that comes from those in the environmental movement. Does that help a little bit?
Yes, it does, because I don't believe it's a myth, but, I mean, wait, it is a myth. I'm sorry. But, no, I just wanted you to explain that more, so thank you very much.
All right, you're sure welcome, Carla. I appreciate that. You know, and again, this myth that we are destroying the planet through incinerating it. I mean, you look at the Antarctic sea ice. Ladies and gentlemen, there is more Antarctic sea ice coverage today than there ever has been since they started measuring it. They have so much ice that it's creating problem for the polar bears. It's not that we don't have enough ice for the polar bears. We have too much ice for the polar bears. Anthropogenic global warming, total myth. It's a scam. It's a hoax. Don't fall for it. Back in 2, Focal Point AFR Talk.